the boy everyone ignored, until his name changed their fate. The beginning. On the edge of a quiet town lived a young man named Ethan Hale. He wasn't handsome by society's standards. His clothes were simple, his shoes were old, and his voice was so calm that most people barely noticed when he spoke. But Ethan possessed something few people did, an extraordinary mind and an unbreakable heart. Every morning, he walked to the town library before sunrise. While others chased popularity, he chased knowledge. Books became his closest friends because they never judged his appearance. People, however, did. Classmates laughed whenever he answered questions in class. "Look at him," they whispered. "He thinks reading books will make people like him." Ethan heard every word. He simply smiled and kept walking. His mother had always told him, "The world often judges the cover of a book before reading its pages. Your job is to become a story they can never forget." Those words became the foundation of his life. One rainy afternoon, Ethan met Sophia Carter, the daughter of one of the richest businessmen in the city. Unlike everyone else, Sophia greeted him politely. For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen. He never confessed his feelings. He believed that love should never become a burden for another person. Months later, Ethan discovered that Sophia was engaged to a wealthy entrepreneur chosen by her family. That night, he quietly placed the small birthday gift he had bought for her into a drawer. He never opened it again. Instead of crying, he made a promise to himself. "If life refuses to respect me today, I will become someone impossible to ignore tomorrow." The next morning, Ethan packed a single backpack, left his hometown, and boarded the first bus heading toward the capital. He had no money, no connections, no powerful family, only a notebook filled with ideas, and a dream nobody else believed in. As the bus disappeared into the distance, Ethan looked back only once. He whispered, "This is not goodbye. This is where my real story begins." The capital was louder than Ethan had imagined. Towering glass buildings reflected dreams that belonged to other people. Luxury cars filled the streets. Crowds hurried past each other without making eye contact. To everyone else, it was a city of opportunity. To Ethan, it was a city that didn't even know he existed. He rented the cheapest room he could find. The walls were cracked, the ceiling leaked whenever it rained, and the tiny window overlooked the back alley of an old restaurant. Every night, he could hear dishes breaking and people arguing downstairs. Still, he smiled, because for the first time, every decision in his life belonged to him. Finding work wasn't easy. For 2 weeks, Ethan walked from one office to another carrying nothing but a worn-out resume. Managers barely looked at it. Some rejected him politely. Others didn't even bother pretending. One employer laughed. "Your grades are impressive," he said, "but clients don't buy intelligence. They buy confidence." The receptionist quietly added, "An appearance." Ethan thanked them anyway. He walked out with the same calm expression he always wore. Inside, his heart felt heavier than ever. Money slowly disappeared. Soon he had only enough to buy one simple meal each day. Breakfast became water. Lunch became hope. Dinner became sleep. Whenever hunger grew unbearable, Ethan went to the public library. Not because he wanted books, but because it was warm. One evening, an elderly librarian noticed him reading until closing time. "You come here every day," she said. "What are you searching for?" Ethan smiled. "A future." The old woman stared at him for several seconds before quietly handing him an old notebook. "It belonged to my husband. He started with nothing. Maybe it will remind you that impossible dreams aren't always impossible." That notebook changed everything. Inside were pages filled with business ideas, leadership notes, and one sentence written in faded ink. Never compete to impress people. Build something so valuable that people compete to find you. Ethan copied those words onto the first page of his own notebook. From that day forward, he stopped chasing jobs. He started chasing solutions. Instead of asking, "Who will hire me?" he asked, "What problem can I solve?" Every day he observed people. He watched cafe owners struggle with waste. He watched delivery drivers lose time because of poor planning. He watched small businesses drowning under complicated paperwork. Most people ignore these problems. Ethan filled notebook after notebook with ideas. Months passed. One rainy afternoon, fate finally knocked on his door. While sitting in a small coffee shop, he noticed a middle-aged man accidentally drop a folder filled with important documents. Papers scattered everywhere. Customers simply walked around them. Ethan rushed to help. As he gathered the papers, he noticed complicated financial reports. Without thinking, he quietly rearranged the pages into a more organized order. The man looked surprised. "You understand these?" "A little," Ethan replied modestly. The stranger smiled. "No, you understand them better than my employees." His name was Daniel Brooks, the founder of a struggling technology company. Instead of offering Ethan money, he offered him a conversation. Neither of them realized that simple conversation would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Brooks Technologies 15 minutes early. The building wasn't as glamorous as the giant corporations downtown. The paint on the walls was fading, half the office lights flickered, and the employees looked exhausted. It felt less like a growing company and more like a business struggling to survive. Daniel Brooks welcomed Ethan with a warm smile. "I can't promise you a big salary," he admitted, "but I can promise you one thing. If you have good ideas, I'll listen." For Ethan, that was worth more than money. His first week was far from easy. Some employees welcomed him politely. Others whispered behind his back, "Who hired this guy? He doesn't even have experience. He'll quit within a month." Ethan heard every comment. Just as he had throughout his life, he said nothing. Instead, he watched, listened, and learned. Late one evening, almost everyone had gone home. While organizing old project files, Ethan noticed something strange. The company had been losing thousands of dollars every month, not because of poor sales, but because of repeated mistakes in inventory, duplicate supplier payments, and outdated processes. The problems weren't hidden. No one had taken the time to connect the dots. Ethan stayed in the office until 2 o'clock in the morning. He built a detailed report showing exactly where the company was bleeding money and how those losses could be stopped. The next morning, he quietly placed the report on Daniel Brooks' desk. Daniel spent nearly an hour reading it. When he finally looked up, he couldn't hide his surprise. "You found all of this in one night?" Ethan nodded. "I only looked carefully." Daniel smiled. "No, Ethan. You saw what everyone else overlooked." Within weeks, the company began following Ethan's recommendations. Unnecessary expenses disappeared. Deliveries became faster. Customers started returning. The numbers improved for the first time in years. Employees who had once mocked Ethan suddenly became unusually polite. Success has a strange way of changing people's behavior. But not everyone was happy. One senior manager, Victor Lang, watched Ethan's growing influence with quiet anger. Victor had spent years building his reputation inside the company. Now a young newcomer was earning the CEO's trust. To Victor, that wasn't competition. It was a threat. One afternoon, Victor approached Ethan with a friendly smile. "You've done impressive work," he said. "I think we should work together." Ethan smiled politely. "I'd be happy to." Victor extended his hand. But behind that smile, he had already started planning Ethan's downfall. A few days later, an important contract worth millions of dollars disappeared from the company's secure server. Panic spread through the office. Meetings were called. Accusations began flying. Someone had deleted the files. The investigation started immediately. Then came the shocking discovery. The system logs showed that the deletion had happened. Using Ethan's employee account, the entire office fell silent. Employees stared at him with disbelief. Some looked disappointed. Others looked satisfied. Victor quietly folded his arms. Exactly as he had planned. Daniel Brooks looked directly into Ethan's eyes. "I have only one question. Did you do it?" Ethan didn't panic. He didn't raise his voice. He simply answered, "No." Daniel remained silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I believe you." Those 3 words changed everything. For the first time in his life, someone trusted Ethan before asking for proof. And Ethan silently promised himself that he would never betray that trust. Daniel Brooks refused to suspend Ethan. That single decision shocked the entire company. Most executives expected Ethan to be escorted out of the building before sunset. Instead, Daniel called him into his office and closed the door. "I don't know who did this," Daniel said quietly, "but I know one thing." He looked Ethan straight in the eyes. A person who spends nights trying to save this company wouldn't destroy it. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something he had almost forgotten. Trust. The investigation continued. While the IT department searched the servers, Ethan asked for permission to examine the company's internal records himself. Daniel agreed. Do whatever you need. That night, the office was silent. Only the sound of keyboards echoed through the empty halls. Hour after hour, Ethan followed tiny details that everyone else had ignored. The login records looked normal. The timestamps looked normal. But one thing didn't. Someone had accessed Ethan's account from a computer on another floor while Ethan's security card showed he was inside the archive room. 2 places at the same time. Impossible. Unless someone inside the company had copied his login credentials. Ethan didn't tell anyone. Not yet. He wanted proof. Real proof. Meanwhile, Brooks Technologies kept growing. Investors who had once ignored the company were now requesting meetings. New contracts arrived almost every week. Business magazines even published an article calling Brooks Technologies one of the city's most promising comeback stories. Daniel smiled every time he read those headlines. Deep inside, he knew who deserved the credit. One evening, Daniel invited Ethan to an important charity gala attended by business leaders, politicians, and journalists. I want people to meet the man helping rebuild this company. Ethan hesitated. I don't belong in places like that. Daniel laughed. You belong there more than most people. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and expensive suits. Ethan felt completely out of place. As he walked through the crowd, familiar laughter suddenly reached his ears. He turned around. Standing only a few steps away was Sophia Carter. Years had passed. She looked more elegant than ever. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sophia smiled softly. Ethan, I never thought I'd see you again. Ethan smiled politely. It's been a long time. Before either of them could continue, a tall businessman approached. He placed his arm around Sophia. You must be Ethan, he said confidently. I'm Ryan Mercer, Sophia's husband. Ethan shook his hand. Nice to meet you. But something felt strange. Ryan smiled with his lips, not with his eyes. As the evening continued, Sophia found a quiet moment to speak with Ethan. I heard you've done incredible things. Ethan shrugged. I'm still learning. She looked down for a second. I owe you an apology. Ethan frowned. For what? For never seeing who you really were. Ethan smiled gently. You don't owe me anything. Life took us in different directions. Before Sophia could reply, Ryan called her from across the room. She walked away, but before leaving, she looked back one last time. There was regret in her eyes. Across the ballroom, another pair of eyes had been watching everything. Victor Lang. He smiled to himself. An old love, old emotions, old memories. He finally saw a weakness he could use. If I can't destroy Ethan through business, I'll destroy him through his heart. Victor quietly picked up his phone and sent a mysterious message to someone. Only 4 words. It's time to begin. Ethan had no idea. The greatest challenge of his life had just begun. The charity gala ended, but Ethan couldn't forget the look in Sophia's eyes. It wasn't love. It wasn't happiness. It was the expression of someone carrying a secret too heavy to share. He told himself to move on. The past belonged in the past. But fate had other plans. A week later, Brooks Technologies signed the biggest contract in its history. The entire office celebrated. Employees who had once ignored Ethan now congratulated him. Some even called him the man who saved the company. Ethan accepted every compliment with the same quiet smile. He never forgot where he had come from. That afternoon, Daniel Brooks called Ethan into his office. I have something important to discuss. Daniel opened a small wooden box and removed a silver keycard. This gives you access to every department in the company. Ethan looked surprised. I trust you completely, Daniel said. From today, you're no longer just an analyst. I want you to become my executive strategy director. For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. Only a year earlier, he had struggled to afford a single meal. Now he was being trusted with the future of an entire company. I won't let you down, he finally said. Daniel smiled. I know. News of Ethan's promotion spread quickly. Most employees applauded the decision. One person didn't. Victor Lang. Inside his office, Victor slammed his fist onto the desk. That position was supposed to be mine. Years of ambition. Years of manipulation. All slipping away because of one quiet young man. His anger was turning into obsession. The next evening, Ethan received an unexpected phone call. "Hello!" A familiar voice answered. "It's Sophia." There was silence for several seconds. "I know I shouldn't call, but I need your help." They met the following afternoon in a quiet cafe far from the business district. Sophia looked different. She seemed tired. Her smile had disappeared. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "My marriage isn't what people think it is." Ethan remained silent. "I married Ryan because my family believed he was the perfect man. But they only saw his public face." She looked down at the untouched cup of coffee. "He controls everything. My money, my decisions, my friendships, my life." Ethan listened without interrupting. For years, he had imagined Sophia living the perfect life. The truth was very different. "I don't need someone to rescue me," Sophia said. "I just needed someone who would believe me." Ethan nodded gently. "I believe you." Those 4 words brought tears to her eyes. For the first time in years, someone had listened without judging her. Across the street, inside a black SUV, a camera lens focused on the cafe window. Click, click, click. Someone was taking photographs. Victor Lang had hired a private investigator. His plan was simple. If the company believed Ethan was secretly involved with a married woman, his reputation would collapse. Sometimes, a lie spreads much faster than the truth. 3 days later, anonymous photographs appeared in the company. Printed copies were left on desks. Digital versions were emailed to employees. Within hours, rumors exploded. "Ethan is having an affair. He used Daniel's trust for personal gain. He isn't the man everyone thinks he is." No one knew where the pictures had come from, but almost everyone believed them. Daniel Brooks stared silently at one of the photographs lying on his desk. Then he looked out the window toward the city skyline. He didn't know whether to believe the rumors or believe the man who had never lied to him. Outside his office, Ethan walked down the hallway, completely unaware that another storm had already begun. By Monday morning, Brooks Technologies no longer felt like the same company. The smiles had disappeared. Conversations stopped whenever Ethan walked past. Some employees avoided looking at him. Others stared as if they already knew he was guilty. Rumors had done what facts never could. They had changed people's hearts overnight. Ethan entered his office and found an envelope lying on his desk. Inside were the same photographs that had been circulating around the company. There was no note, no explanation, just pictures designed to tell a story that wasn't true. He looked at them for a long moment. Then he quietly placed them back into the envelope. He refused to let anger control him. Someone wanted him to react. He wouldn't give them that satisfaction. An hour later, Daniel Brooks called an emergency board meeting. The atmosphere was tense. One director slammed a folder onto the table. "Our investors are asking questions." Another spoke sharply. "The media is starting to notice." A third added, "If these rumors continue, the company's reputation could be destroyed." Finally, all eyes turned toward Daniel. "You have one choice," a senior board member said. "Remove Ethan from his position." The room fell silent. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Then, in a calm voice, he replied, "I will not fire an innocent man because of gossip." The directors exchanged uneasy glances. One of them warned, "Then be prepared to lose the company." Outside the meeting room, Ethan had no idea what was happening inside. He was focused on something else, the IT investigation. He had spent weeks quietly gathering evidence about the deleted contract. Late that evening, he finally found it. Hidden deep inside the server logs was a forgotten backup. It revealed that someone had remotely copied Ethan's login credentials months earlier. Even more shocking, the remote access came from a computer assigned to Victor Lang's executive office. Ethan stared at the screen. At last, he had proof. But he knew one thing. Evidence alone wasn't enough. Victor was too powerful. He needed the truth to come out in front of everyone. Meanwhile, Sophia made a decision that terrified her. She walked into Ryan Mercer's office carrying a small envelope. "I want a divorce." Ryan looked up slowly. Then he smiled. Not with kindness, with arrogance. "You think you can leave me? You have no idea what I'm capable of." Sophia didn't answer. She placed the envelope on his desk and walked away. The moment the door closed, Ryan's smile disappeared. He picked up his phone. Find Ethan Hale. I don't care how. I want his life destroyed. That same night, Ethan returned to his apartment after another exhausting day. As he unlocked the door, he noticed something unusual. The room had been searched. Books were scattered across the floor. Drawers were left open. His notebook, the one he had carried since leaving his hometown, was missing. Nothing valuable had been stolen. Only the notebook that contained every idea, every plan, and every dream he had ever written down. Someone wasn't looking for money. Someone was trying to erase his future. Ethan slowly looked around the room. Then he whispered to himself, "They're getting desperate." For the first time, he realized he wasn't just fighting office politics anymore. He was fighting people who were willing to destroy lives to protect their secrets. He closed the broken door behind him. His eyes were calm, but his resolve had never been stronger. "They started this war," he said quietly. "I'll finish it with the truth." 3 days after his apartment was searched, Ethan made a decision. He would stop defending himself. Instead, he would let the truth expose itself. Early Monday morning, Ethan walked into Daniel Brooks' office carrying a small flash drive. "I found something," he said. Daniel closed the door. Inside the drive were security logs, backup records, and access reports proving that someone had cloned Ethan's login credentials months before the contract disappeared. Daniel read every page carefully. Finally, he looked up. "This points directly toward Victor." Ethan nodded. "But suspicion isn't enough. We need him to reveal himself." Daniel smiled. "So what's your plan?" Ethan leaned forward. "We're going to give Victor exactly what he wants." Daniel looked confused. "What do you mean?" "We'll create a fake project. A project so valuable that Victor won't be able to ignore it." Within hours, only 3 people knew about the secret project. Daniel, Ethan, and Victor. At least, that was what Victor believed. A confidential file named Project Horizon was placed inside the company's secure server. According to the documents, it contained plans for a billion-dollar international partnership. In reality, every page inside was fake. It was bait. Victor couldn't resist. Late that night, after everyone had left the office, he quietly entered his executive suite. Using hidden software installed months earlier, he attempted to copy the files. The moment he accessed them, the system automatically recorded everything. Time, location, computer ID, screen recording. Every second, Ethan had anticipated every move. The next morning, Ethan arrived before sunrise. The security system had already generated a complete report. Victor had taken the bait. For the first time, they had undeniable evidence. Daniel stared at the screen in disbelief. "He actually did it," Ethan quietly replied. People driven by greed rarely know when to stop. Meanwhile, Sophia's life was falling apart. Ryan had discovered that she wanted a divorce. His behavior became even more controlling. He blocked her bank accounts, confiscated her phone, and warned her, "If you leave me, I'll destroy everyone you care about." Sophia wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid for Ethan. That evening, Sophia secretly managed to send Ethan a handwritten letter through an old family friend. It contained only one sentence. "Ryan and Victor know each other. Be careful." Ethan read it twice, then a third time. Everything suddenly made sense. Victor wasn't acting alone. Ryan Mercer had been helping him from the beginning. Business rivalry, personal revenge. It had all become one dangerous game. 2 days later, Daniel announced an emergency company-wide meeting. Every employee gathered in the main conference hall. Victor sat confidently in the front row. He believed he had already won. Daniel stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to discuss trust." The room became silent. Daniel nodded toward Ethan. "It's time." Ethan walked slowly to the front. He connected the flash drive to the large presentation screen. Victor smiled, certain there was nothing Ethan could prove. The screen turned black. Then a security video began to play. Victor's smile slowly disappeared. The room fell completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The truth was finally about to be seen by everyone. The conference hall was silent. More than 300 employees stared at the giant screen. Victor Lang folded his arms confidently. He believed Ethan had nothing. Then the video began. The security footage showed the executive floor at 2:17 a.m. The hallway was empty. Seconds later, Victor walked toward his office. He looked around carefully before unlocking the door. A timestamp appeared in the corner of the screen. The next video showed Victor connecting an unauthorized device to the company's secure network. Then came the screen recording. Every click, every file, every password, everything was captured. No one in the room could deny what they were seeing. Whispers filled the hall. "That's Victor. He copied the files himself. I can't believe this." Victor jumped to his feet. "This is fake. This has been edited." Ethan remained calm. Without saying a word, he handed a folder to the company's legal advisor. Inside were independent digital forensic reports confirming that the recordings were authentic. The legal advisor looked at the board. "I've verified these reports. There is no evidence of manipulation." Victor's face turned pale. Daniel Brooks slowly walked onto the stage. "4 years," he said. "I trusted the wrong man." He looked directly at Victor. "And I doubted the right one." Security officers entered the hall. Victor realized there was nowhere left to run. As they escorted him toward the exit, he stopped and looked back at Ethan. "You think you've won? This isn't over." Ethan answered quietly. "I never wanted to win. I only wanted the truth." Victor lowered his head. For the first time in years, he had nothing left to say. Just as everyone thought the meeting was over, Ethan stepped toward the microphone. "I have one more thing to share." The room fell silent again. A new document appeared on the screen. It was a series of financial records, wire transfers, hidden accounts, fake consulting payments. Every trail led to the same name, Ryan Mercer. The audience gasped. Daniel stared at the documents in disbelief. "Ryan has been paying Victor for months," Ethan explained. "They worked together." The stolen contracts were never the real goal. They wanted Brooks Technologies to collapse, so Ryan could buy it for a fraction of its value. The room erupted in shock. Everything finally made sense. That afternoon, financial investigators froze Ryan's business accounts. Several companies immediately canceled their partnerships with him. His carefully built reputation began to crumble. News channels reported the scandal across the country. The man who once seemed untouchable was suddenly standing alone. Sophia watched the news from her lawyer's office. Tears rolled down her face. Not because Ryan had fallen, but because the truth had finally been heard. She whispered, "It's over." For the first time in many years, she felt free. Later that evening, Daniel invited Ethan to the rooftop of the company headquarters. The city lights stretched across the horizon. Daniel smiled. "When I first met you in that little coffee shop, I thought I was hiring an employee." He extended his hand. "I was actually meeting the future leader of his company." Ethan looked at the skyline. He remembered the hungry nights, the tiny apartment, the endless rejection. Every painful step had brought him here. But deep inside, he knew his journey wasn't finished. Because success isn't the end of a story. Sometimes, it's where the greatest chapter begins. The scandal dominated every news channel for weeks. Victor Lang was arrested for corporate fraud. Ryan Mercer was charged with financial crimes and conspiracy. Brooks Technologies survived the crisis and emerged stronger than ever. Investors returned. New clients signed long-term contracts. The company reached record profits for the first time in its history. Everyone celebrated, except Ethan. Success had brought him everything he once dreamed of. Respect, security, recognition. But it had also taken away something precious. His peace. Every day brought interviews, meetings, and public appearances. People who had ignored him for years now wanted to stand beside him. Some praised him sincerely. Others simply wanted to benefit from his success. Ethan could no longer tell the difference. One evening, Daniel Brooks invited Ethan to dinner. After the meal, Daniel placed a folder on the table. "I've made my decision," he said. Curious, Ethan opened it. Inside was a legal document. It named Ethan as the new chief executive officer of Brooks Technologies. Ethan looked up in surprise. "I've spent my whole life building this company," Daniel said with a smile. "But a company doesn't belong to the person who starts it. It belongs to the person who can lead it into the future. I want that person to be you." The offer was everything Ethan had ever worked for. Yet, he didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "If I accept this position, who will I become?" Daniel smiled. "That's a question only you can answer." A few days later, Ethan received another unexpected visitor. Sophia. She looked happier than he had ever seen her. "The divorce is final," she said. "I'm finally free." They walked together through a quiet city park. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Sophia stopped. "I've spent years regretting the choices I made." She looked into Ethan's eyes. "I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been." There was silence. The wind gently moved the leaves above them. Finally, Ethan spoke. "You don't owe me your future because you regret your past. You deserve a new beginning." "So do I." Sophia nodded. A small smile appeared on her face. She understood. Sometimes, caring for someone doesn't mean holding on to them. Sometimes, it means letting them walk their own path. They hugged, not as lovers, but as two people who had finally found peace. That night, Ethan returned to his apartment. While organizing his belongings, he discovered the old notebook that had been stolen months earlier. Someone had quietly returned it. Inside, between the pages, was a handwritten note. It read, "Never let success change the kindness that built it." There was no signature. Ethan smiled. He didn't need one. The next morning, hundreds of employees gathered inside the company's auditorium. Everyone expected Ethan to accept the CEO position. Daniel stood at the podium. "I'd like to introduce the next leader of Brooks Technologies." The audience applauded as Ethan walked onto the stage. He stood before the microphone, looked across the room, then took a deep breath. "I've made my decision." The hall became completely silent. The auditorium was completely silent. Hundreds of employees waited for Ethan's answer. Daniel Brooks stood beside him with a proud smile. The board of directors watched from the front row. Journalists held their cameras steady. Everyone expected Ethan to say one word. "Yes." Instead, Ethan looked around the room and slowly began to speak. "When I first came to the city," he said, "I owned one backpack and a notebook. I had no money, no family connections, no powerful friends. I only had one thing, hope." The room was silent. "I know what it feels like to be ignored. I know what it feels like to be judged before anyone knows your story. And I promised myself, if life ever gave me success, I would use it to open doors for people who never get a chance." Ethan turned toward Daniel. "You offered me the greatest honor of my life, and I will always be grateful." He paused. "But I cannot accept the position of CEO." A wave of surprise spread through the audience. The board members exchanged confused looks. Even Daniel seemed shocked. Ethan smiled gently. "I don't want to spend my life sitting behind one desk. I want to build opportunities. I want to create companies. I want to create scholarships. I want to help young people who are told they are not good enough. Because someone once believed in me. And now it's my turn to believe in others." For a moment, no one moved. Then Daniel slowly began to clap. One person, then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium rose to its feet. The applause echoed through the building. Not because Ethan had become the CEO, but because he had chosen something greater than power. He had chosen purpose. Months passed. Ethan launched the Hope Foundation, a non-profit organization that provided education, mentorship, and financial support to talented students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Many of those students had stories that reminded him of his own. Shy, ignored, full of potential. He made sure they were never overlooked again. Daniel Brooks appointed a respected executive to lead the company. Ethan remained a strategic partner and trusted advisor. Together, they continued to grow Brooks Technologies while changing thousands of lives beyond the business world. One autumn afternoon, Ethan visited the small library where his journey had truly begun. The elderly librarian smiled as soon as she saw him. "I knew you'd come back." Ethan laughed softly. "You gave me more than a notebook. You gave me a reason to believe in myself." She pointed toward a young boy sitting alone in the corner, quietly reading a worn-out book. "He reminds me of someone." Ethan walked over and sat beside him. "What are you reading?" he asked. The boy looked nervous. "A book about people who change the world." Ethan smiled. "Then keep reading. You never know. One day, someone might write a book about you." The boy smiled for the first time that day. As Ethan left the library, he looked up at the evening sky. He remembered every painful moment. The rejection, the loneliness, the betrayal, the hunger, the heartbreak. He realized something important. Those moments had not destroyed him. They had shaped him. The story that began with a boy everyone ignored ended with a man who gave others a reason to believe. Because true success isn't measured by the size of your office or the money in your bank account. It is measured by the number of lives you leave better than you found them. The end.